AI as a bank at the moment, you are. It's just your employees are using it.
How many times have we heard people say, can you not just point AI, or can't you get AI to do that? And that's not necessarily how it works.
You can drive a Ferrari to work, but a Ford will get you there just the same.
Yeah.
Like, there is no real requirements to be pointing the shiniest, newest things. People like to do it, and people like to have Ferraris. I'd love one. It's not going to necessarily make your processes any better.
So we actually probably rule out more AI projects for our clients than we end up doing for them.
The old playbooks are being rewritten in real time. On this podcast, we go beyond the headlines to explore the human side of financial services, the pressure, the risk, and the reality of tough decisions. We're talking to the people doing the work, no scripts, just results. I'm your host, Sammy Vincent. Welcome to the Behive Podcast, brought to you by BUK. Today, we've got Fraser Whitelaw and Max McKiernan with us. Fraser, he supported the deployment of AI models in challenger banks, but mainly focused on helping Tier 1 banks and asset management groups within AI policy, frameworks, governance, and commercialisation. Welcome, Fraser. And next to him, we've got Max McKiernan. You've worked near to and on AI for his whole career across multiple industries, including automotive, medical technology, and now focusing on financial services. You've spent significant time building and implementing intelligent automation, natural language processing, machine learning, and agentic workflows. Welcome, Max.
Good to be here.
So, guys, if you could tell us, please, how you got into AI, why you're interested in it, and what your experience with it, that'd be really great, please. Max, we'll start with you.
So I think I've been around AI for basically the entirety of my career, as you have alluded to already. I started off in automotive and did a lot around self-driving technology. That was all the rage at the time, and obviously now, having moved on through various different industries, always been tangentially linked to it. Spent some time within medical technology and then financial services, where we're currently very, very focused. I think it's such an interesting technology that's obviously ripping up the rule books at the moment of what we think is possible, how we do our jobs day to day, and all those sorts of things. So I think for me, it's always been something that I've been around, but actually has developed into a bit of a passion area for me, and very much enjoy working on it.
I think my intro to AI is slightly less professional. I actually started learning about AI on YouTube, watching people build AI robots for gaming systems to speed run games that I used to watch when I was a kid. So it was all about how AI could find the optimal turns and corners for racing car games. And then I ended up watching videos on how the coders would input things into AI and how AI would learn and models would grow. Obviously, everything that we do in work at the moment has data. So was largely focused on data at the beginning of my career. And then the natural progression of how AI, as Max has said, is blown up in our day-to-day worlds. I actually just had a passion from it outside of work, and it's been a continued passion into my professional career.
Okay, cool. That's great, guys. And can you tell us a bit more about how you're working with AI in your projects at the minute, or your last few projects, how it's been going and what you've been seeing?
Yeah, so I think for me personally, I had a very interesting sort of non-financial services related project, but during COVID, I actually spent a lot of time building a machine learning sort of interaction, I suppose, for remote patient monitoring. So we were looking after very, very ill people at home, all with the backdrop of COVID, and how we could actually work out if they were going to be requiring sort of hospital care. That was obviously sort of one of the first AI projects that I was involved with, but something that obviously you have direct impact on people's lives. Moving into financial services, currently doing some agentic workflow things, which is very, very interesting in terms of optimizing the processes. How can we look at the processes that we've have been established for a number of years, and basically understand where AI is actually best placed to either replace humans who are necessarily doing sort of repetitive automatable tasks, or just actually change the sort of the customer experience and give customers better or more opportunities to sort of interact with our platforms, and give them a bit more choice. So I think it's a bit of a mix of impacts on humans' life through artificial intelligence that I'd sort of characterize.
And Fraser, can you tell us about your projects as well?
Yeah, so my first professional project with AI was on customer vulnerability. So we actually worked for the Challenger Bank, and the model that we built was to support and enhance the controls that operators had when they were talking to their customers. So the bank that we supported, over 90% of their comms was via text, so over the messaging app, which gave us a huge amount of data that we could feed into the models. And it was very good at picking up the little nuances in the way people spoke, and spotting patterns in one conversation to the next, because what we were relying on originally was the operator spotting those flags within the conversation, but it was actually quite tricky if you spoke to a different operator before, that there was a pattern of this customer being worried about making a payment or talking about other issues, non-financial issues, that may make them vulnerable to things that may affect their, their banking well-being. So yeah, that was the first experience. After that, didn't deploy any more models. I went into more group strategy around the policies and frameworks and how you would set up your AI business units. And yeah, I was focused on that in tier one banks and also asset managers as well.
Nice. On the setting up the AI, I suppose, function, if you will, in banks and asset managers, what are the first things that you look to set up? How is it setting out the mission or how they might use AI in the bank or the asset management firm?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way of starting the question. So I think it depends where you start from, right? I don't think anybody at the moment has not thought about AI, has not used one of the models or tools that are available. ChatGPT is in your pocket. So even if you don't have anything commercial in your bank, you've probably been exposed to it already. So that's probably the minimum, I would say. Then going forward, you've probably got some people testing and building, looking at agents and, small working groups. And then going further, you probably have small pockets of people who are already actually actively engaging in the technology. So it depends where you are on that cycle. But I think once you get to the point where you decide as a business that you want to set up an AI department, you need to look at three key things. So it's simple: people, process, and system, right? So the system in this example is more like the technology. So you need to build the technology, have it built into your IT platforms, source from data files or standalone. There's a lot to be talked about on data walls, what it has access to, and I'm sure we'll cover that in some other questions. On the people side, you need people who know the technology. Now you can outsource that externally, and bring in AI experts who will help you set it up, or you can train a small pod of people that are in your company that are, basically your old data scientists are now your new AI modelers. And process is quite often not given the credit versus those two that I think it should. Because if you have a process that is cumbersome, complicated, difficult, doesn't work, and as Max is nodding along, I know he sees this all the while in banks, it's just the process that is, right? And people don't really know why it does what it does. They know their box. So when we come in and we try and model or create a digital twin of a system or process that works, the first thing we do is really have to clean the process. So it's as important, and maybe sometimes more important, depending on how bad that is. So to answer the question, it depends where you are on the cycle, and it depends what your systems are and then what you want to focus on. Once you've got that foundation, then you can go about setting up your business units and your structures, and we can, discuss that in more detail.
I think just to add to what Fraser's been saying, is if you're not using AI as a bank at the moment, you are. It's just your employees are using it, and they're using it in a sort of a shadow format. So everyone has been exposed to ChatGPT, for example. Everyone is using it in their personal lives. I say everyone, a lot of people. And people are, see the value of these tools. So they then think, if I don't have a tool available to me within the bank that has been provided, I'm going to be using ChatGPT, I'm going to be using Claude, I'm going to be using whatever the model might be, which obviously then exposes you to risk, because obviously your data is then leaving your platforms, which is obviously a bit of a a negative thing for a bank to be doing. So I think it suffices to say, if you're not using AI at the moment, you are exposing yourself to risk, and you should probably be accelerating your AI plans, to be able to bring those things in. And then obviously all of the things that Fraser has said applies in terms of your people, your processes, all of the governance controls, those sorts of things. I think are paramount, and we'll probably dive into in a bit more depth. But shadow AI is a very, very real thing at the moment, and probably one of those risks that has been identified in more recent times.
That's really interesting. Thank you both. You've touched on a couple of interesting points there. So shadow AI being one of them. Obviously, yes, it is. It's so accessible. All of us use it now, I think. Most people I know. I've even got him on my WhatsApp, and I text him all the time, asking questions on a daily basis. So on that, what I'm getting from you guys is it would be prudent to act quicker rather than later, in sort of integrating controls and having that in place so that it's within your realm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, obviously AI is all encompassing at the moment, and there's so many different ways that you can implement it within your organization. So, saying let's implement AI is not a good strategy. You need to understand what you want to be actually optimizing for. So have a think about your metrics, have a think about your OKRs, have a think about what you're actually trying to optimize. So do you want to make your customer experience market leading? Do you want to make your employee experience in terms of how they deal with their clients market leading? Do you want to have your risk profiles as mitigated as possible? All of these things are possible through AI. All of these things could be done, but actually, do you need to focus on one rather than pulling all three levers and not necessarily actually fulfilling any of them? So I think while it is very true to say implement AI, we need to be cautious in how you apply it, and think about it from a strategic and an OKR metric perspective. Think what you're trying to optimize.
Yeah, and I think, agreeing with everything that Max is saying, I think the pace that people want to pick up the technology is obviously there, and I think you do need to move quickly to stay on top of the technology. If you're too slow by the time you've built it and deployed it, there's something better out there. And you have to remember that all of our clients and people that we support are competing with the other clients, right? So one bank versus another bank. So it's not really a matter of, do you have the technology to fix a problem? It's sort of like who's got the best, because the benefits of AI at the moment, or the benefits you get, out of AI are, massive cost savings, enhanced due diligence, better controls. You're basically competing on, it will allow you to compete to gather more customers and eventually outperform your competitor. So it's not a action to a point. It's something that you're going to have to keep on top of. Now, the rush to get AI in is one thing. But from a policy and a governance point of view, the AI safety is also super important. So there's two sides. You need to be fast enough, but not too fast. What I mean by going too fast is, building models that you don't fully understand and deploying them in environments that are not fully ready for it, and then finding out further down the line that you've exposed yourself unintentionally to risks that you weren't aware of because you didn't do the correct procedure and testing. That is quite tricky to do because, the legislation can't even keep up with AI technology. You need to move quickly, but you need to move in the right way. And that's a tricky thing to balance at the moment.
Move safely as well.
Yeah, quick and safe at the same time, right? Like that's two things that you need to balance.
What are the things that you would recommend putting in place first, I suppose, before you try and bring any AI into any sort of operational capacity?
I think we're going to say the same thing.
Yeah, I think we probably are. Centre of Excellence is probably a good place to start.
Okay.
So what is a Centre of Excellence really? It is basically a mechanism by which you can deploy AI within an organisation while also having the guardrails in place and the governance structures. So effectively this is achieved through what we as consultants would term a hub and spoke model. what that effectively means is you have a central team and then you have a number of teams who then surround them, but they all are interconnected through the central hub. The hub is effectively responsible for sort of the outcomes and the scope. So as I've mentioned, effectively aligning on the business strategy. So at a very high level, your leaders are going to be setting out what they want to be trying to optimize for. And therefore you are able to then set the strategy and filter it through this hub. They're also going to be setting sort of the metrics and the OKRs that we've talked about. So how can you measure what the impact of AI is within your organization? I think secondly, they then end up defining the roles and responsibilities really of every team, and sort of the team membership as well. Also able to sort of manage the resources that you have. So if you have development capabilities, if you have your testers, all those sorts of things, it's able to sort of centralize that, but also how they're distributed through the various different programs of work that you're wanting to be doing. Them coming onto the governance side of things, obviously they need to have the sort of the guardrails in place. So if you're going to be doing a sort of a very common approach is having sort of a proof of concept and then going through to a pilot and then fully into production, there would be sort of hurdles and boundaries that would be standardized across all of those in terms of how you want to be progressing and making sure that you're meeting, the sort of the things that you set out to meet in a controlled manner. And then I think the other thing is around sort of the prioritization of the intake. So as we've already alluded to several times, AI is able to do a lot of things, and it is also capable of taking up a huge amount of resource, not only sort of monetarily, but also from a planet perspective as well. That's probably a topic for another day. But you want to be prioritizing, the things that you need to be actually wanting to build. So you may have 10 things in your pipeline, but you only have the capability to build 5. Which are the 5 that you're going to prioritize? So I think that's probably,
Yeah, I think I agree with everything. I think just as a point of information, the step before any AI project is getting all your data and everything in order. So everything that Max has said, I completely agree with. You need to set up how you're going to do it, right? And make sure you're doing it in the right way. And for all of the considerations that Max has just mentioned are things you need to think about. But if you do all of that work and then realize you don't have any data and you don't have a system, there's no point Subway as a branch doing all this thinking, setting up a center of excellence. Like Subway as a brand, maybe we'll have one as a big company. But I mean, like your mum and pop pizza shop or whatever, they'll use it in a very different way than our clients do. So we obviously come from a background of institutional banks, massive companies with lots of technology, lots of budget, but that's not necessarily the way everybody needs to look at it. But I think the one common thing across all people who want to use AI is make sure you have the data, the data available. We always joke that every AI project starts as a data cleansing project, because garbage in is garbage out, right? And that's
for sure.
We end up saying that quite a lot to our clients. We think it's obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people say, well, we have a massive amount of data. Our data lake is, massive terabytes of information. Can you just point AI at it? And Max is laughing because how many times have we heard people say, can you not just point AI, or can't you get AI to do that? And that's not necessarily how it works. So yeah, you need the frameworks, you need the structure, you need to understand why you're doing what you're doing so you can do it properly. That stops you wasting time, wasting money, and getting the right outcomes. But you actually have to be able to do it, which is, I think, what I'm trying to say. You can't plan for it if you can't do it.
Yeah. I think AI journeys start without AI is effectively what we're driving at. Like, simplify all of your processes down to their core components. And at that point, once your data is ready, you can then apply automations, and then you can go through to AI and apply it from a variety of different perspectives. But as I say, start without AI is probably is not the bad place to start.
Yeah, and I think we take clients. So we actually get engaged by clients who come to us and say, we want to use AI. So Max and I will sit there and say, that sounds great. We like AI. How can we help? And when we actually sit and listen to the story of what they think they want to use it for, and the rules and the process that it's trying to replace. Deterministic automation with simple logic rules. If customer does not have enough money, do not make payment. That AI does not need to be involved in that. Simple logic rules. So we actually probably rule out more AI projects for our clients than we end up doing for them, because they just have the buzzword, they want to use AI, as I mentioned earlier, point to AI at it and do it. But if you tidy it up, if you realize what it is you're actually trying to do, one of our first things in the sort of AI readiness is this process a good candidate for AI to potentially help with? And that covers the benefits that you may expect, because we all know what AI can do, but it's, do you need AI to do that? Because AI as projects take a lot of time, especially in regulated banks. It's a lot of governance. There's a lot of nervousness, which means there's layers upon layers and upon layers of approvals and forums that you need to go through, and that obviously costs time and takes time. Costs money. But if you know at the outset that you probably shouldn't use AI, we are essentially saving clients lots of money by allowing them to get the same outcome that they really want, just without AI. So it's interesting on a conversation about AI for us to raise the point that AI isn't the answer to everything, but the reality is that it's not.
Yeah, I think the analogy is, isn't it? Like, you can drive a Ferrari to work, but a Ford will get you there just the same.
Yeah.
Like, there is no real requirements to be pointing the shiniest, newest things, but people like to do it. People like to have Ferraris. I'd love one. But, it's not going to necessarily make your processes any better.
Yeah, or the outcomes as well, right?
True.
So the process may get better, but you've spent a bunch of money, you've got a complicated AI that nobody knows how to manage, you might be relying on externals to manage it for you, and really you've got the same outcome. So you could have done it a lot cheaper and a lot easier in a lot less time. And Max has already mentioned a bunch of times about prioritizing, right? Like, that all feeds into it. So if somehow that project made it to the top of your prioritization list, you're probably not looking at the right things. And again, that's what we help our clients with, is what's the actual correct way of getting those to the top. Quite often what happens in my experience, the people with the biggest budget and the loudest voices, that's where we go and build for. And then a couple months down the line, you hear someone's next in the queue, a third in the queue, fourth in the queue. And the benefits of using AI on their projects are actually far bigger than the ones that you focused on.
Yeah. The benefits case is something obviously you do need to have a look at very, very carefully, and trying to quantify as well. What is your project going to do? Is it going to reduce headcount? Is it going to reduce time? Time's obviously a massive factor. Lots of different things that you're trying to do from a benefits case perspective, and that obviously then all feeds into those OKRs that we've talked about. And I think the reporting back as well, and saying, let's say on a 3 monthly cadence, we have gone out and we have done 2, 3, 4, 5 projects, and this is the benefits that they have realised. There's no shame in saying we have not realised the benefits that we thought we had. You can, AI is a magic tool in some ways, but it is also fallible. It may end up breaking processes. It may end up not being quite the thing that you thought it was going to be. So obviously pivoting, shifting, learning your lessons, all very important as well from AI, just as with any other technology that you might implement.
Yeah, and I think that life cycle of was it try fast, fail fast, right?
Yeah.
So you want to, there's a lot of things that people want to point it at. So you stand up your sandboxes and your proof of concepts, and you allow yourself to try lots of different things, because with the expectation of the benefits you might realize, you can also underestimate them. So we've had a couple use cases come through. Again, I wasn't involved with a part of the forums that we saw them come through, but the business case that was put forward to us, they actually really overachieved. And so when we go back to the prioritization thing, they may have not been at the place that they should have been in the queue because they were underselling themselves. And again, you don't know that. Obviously, things fail. That's probably the most obvious thing. When you start a project, you say, this might not work. But sometimes people don't say, what if this works better than we think? So you need to take those use cases, make them flagships, investigate why they've done, and then create some sort of common capability or open sourced technology that you can pass around the business units, because quite a lot of the products that we see built are funded and championed by the person who wants to use it for their use case. And if you don't make it open enough or wide enough, you end up with a product that only one business unit can use, only one department, one region, country, whatever, right? But if you have all these massive benefits and realize after the fact, then you've missed the opportunity to, apply those benefits across the bank. So it's not just about not doing things that fail, right? You're allowed to do that. As Max is saying, we actually encourage you to do that, but do it small scale. Don't spend millions of dollars and make massive mistakes you can't come back from. But then also keep an eye out for the ones that really are the unicorns that blow up more than you thought would.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I think what you mentioned, Fraser, as well, in terms of making things that are reusable within organizations.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the time what we see is business units going out and wanting fundamentally very similar things.
But with slightly different things that mean you can't share them, right?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think it's also worthwhile within that hub and spoke model that we were talking about earlier. The hub should be championing the use cases and saying, we have built this here. See if there are components of this that you can reuse and utilize across the bank, because there's no point spending the money again. You've already built it. You've already built that capability. You have, most importantly, the knowledge within the organization and the pitfalls, all those sorts of things. You can take that Lego piece and hopefully transplant it into something else and take all of the knowledge with you. So from the fail fast, but deliver quickly as well, you're going to be able to deliver that much faster if you have a good understanding of the AI sort of projects that are going on and what has worked, what hasn't worked within an organization.
Yeah. And I think from a program point of view, managing AI projects as well, the requirements gathering and the approval process and the considerations, you kind of want to get all of those done at once, right? So kill many birds with one stone, not just one or two. So if you ever get to the point where you've gone through your approval process and you've got all your requirements and then you launch a model, quite a lot of the models are black box to most people and black box to everybody in some cases, right? So you may get a new requirement by moving from one country to another country that it's, even though it's one little requirement, you kind of have to lift the lid and go back and then test. And it's very difficult, especially if you've trained a model, right? I don't think we've mentioned that yet. So AI models need to get trained to become good at what they do. So take an example. If you have UK-based data for whatever use case you're thinking about, and we train a model on that, right? Massive benefits, it works amazingly, right? You might be an international company, Hong Kong wants to use it, okay? You cannot lift and shift that model over because if flashback to the top of this conversation with customer vulnerability, people have different ways of speaking, right? There's different nuances and tones in the language. So our model was built on UK customers. That's where we work, that's where we operate, right? Americans might have a very different way of speaking. So the model won't pick it up perfectly. So even in the operation of the model itself, it's not just that the technology is the Lego block, right? You can lift and shift it. It's that Lego block might not fit on the Lego set that you're trying to put it on as well. So being aware of that at the beginning, as you're going through the program setup and the governance and the the approval process, which takes too long, if you're asking me, you can get it all out in the open, right? And then you save yourself coming back and repeating. Interesting scenarios we've seen before, and we worked together, where the Lego block was passed department by department, and you basically had the same conversation with different people 6 months down the line. So if you think about it, it's going to take years to get this out to everybody, whereas you could have taken a bit longer at the beginning, planned it properly, and deployed globally, if the model makes sense, right? There are arguments to be made that you want models focused on specific things so that they're not too broad that they don't perform as well as they should. But largely from a program point of view, the implementation can be full company rather than unit by unit, and that's what we encourage.
Yeah, I think there's a good point there to be made as well around how you structure yourself as an organization as you're going about this. So I think from a very foundational level, there are LLMs that can be used, so large language models that can be used across everybody really. So the likes of the ChatGPTs and the Claudes and effectively the generative tools. I think those have an application within office work that is probably relatively ubiquitous. I think the second thing is then around how you sort of surface those things. So the hosting of it, the surfacing, whether you're using AWS, whether you're using Microsoft, whoever you might want to be using. And then I think the third thing, which we're then touching on, is the very sort of specialist use cases. And there are specialists out there for almost everything that you can think of. And identifying those is obviously something that's relatively challenging and won't have a ubiquitous business case across everybody. So I think, obviously, in terms of recommendations and in terms of where you're going to see productivity gain, I think almost every organization understands the appeal of an LLM that is relatively general. But then as you go down sort of the rabbit hole of specificity, I think obviously the business needs to be more mature at that sort of stage, because I think the risks start to amplify and, the governance structures start to be more specific and a number of considerations there.
Guys, we've talked a lot about value in the conversation so far. So if I were a client, how would I make sure that I can see the value that you've brought to me with AI?
Yeah, so I think from a commercialization point of view, it might be easier to talk about how I've seen it done wrong. So when we're talking about putting your business case forward on how you calculate the potential return for the product that you're going to do, I think people overpromise or miscalculate the way that they're actually getting the gains. And a very short, quick example is if you have a company of 250,000 people that costs billions of dollars a year to run, and you're saving on average 5 minutes a day per person, then you have $100 million in savings, right? So that might be worth spending $99 million on the project to make your $1 million. Projects need to be a bit more than that, but you get my maths. Now, in reality, 5 minutes per person per day is the difference between taking a restroom break a little bit longer, having a chat at the water cooler with your colleagues. Sometimes those benefits don't actually materialize onto the company's bottom line. So you need to be careful about actual dollar impacts.
I think from my perspective, it's an interesting one. And I think I would probably focus on the simplification before you're actually applying AI. We've seen it a number of times where you go into a process and you're not challenging the status quo enough. So I think in challenging the status quo of why do we do things like this, is it because in times gone by we've had to scan in documents and we've had to then post them to the bank or if we have to get, a passport from someone, for example, then how do we get that document? There's a number of different technologies that we can leverage and we can sort of bring to the fore. So actually simplifying the process down and then understanding how automation can be brought in is probably where I would start in terms of getting the most value out of what you're trying to achieve.
I think measuring it is, it's pretty straightforward with normal technical outcomes. So any technical implementation, you might have lag time, ping times, drops per month, number of calls not answered. You've got your normal system things. But I think if you're over focused on the system performance improvements, again from the commercialization point of view, just because you have 10% less calls into your call center, does that actually mean that you can make a nominal difference to the way that you operate? And probably not. So it's tricky. It's a good question.
I think it also is if you have 10% call reduction and you have 10 calls a year, what are you doing here? It's like you've reduced one call. If you actually break it down, it's very easy to hide within metrics of, it sounds very glamorous to say we've done 10% reductions, but actually if you break it down and it's one call, it's one email, it's 1 minute for someone. These aren't high value use cases. So I think the other piece of advice would be try not to glorify your metrics and hide the actual value that you're trying to show.
How have you seen, you've obviously mentioned the buzzword aspect of AI and people being keen to bring it into their firms, right? So, but in addition to that, there's also, have you seen reluctance in contrast? Because obviously, even on a daily basis, on using it on my phone, on my computer, there are certain demographics who might be a bit more reluctant to integrate it into their daily lives. Are you seeing the same?
Yeah, I think from like the demographic point of view, to start at the end of the question, there's from a customer point of view, you probably see different people engaging with it. When I was talking to banks about this, the sort of short and simple answer is, the further we go through the generations, the more akin they will be to this technology. So you obviously can't ignore your some demographics, but I think as we go into the future, people will be born with AI. It's like people don't remember a time before the internet now. I think internally, you 100% see reluctance from people. I think the biggest fear is if I engage with AI and I teach people my process, at the end of the day, it will replace me. And that's probably a bit more of a myth than it is a reality. But that's probably the most friction I see from people that we're interviewing about the processes that we want to help. And we keep using this phrase all the time that AI won't replace you, but the people using AI will. So once you get over that hurdle, then yeah, we start seeing the adoption because they start realizing the benefits, right?
Yeah, I think it is very much around, what we've spoken about today has been very much around the business cases and how you as an organization set it up, and have almost neglected the sort of the human aspect. I think within organizations, there will be a lot of AI deployment, but probably within a human in the loop. And that will be the way that it will be for, I don't want to say a year, 2 years or whatever, and date this, but it will be the way that AI is controlled. And, some of the governance structures is often to have a human in the loop inspecting what AI is doing before it is then, driven out to clients or to customers or whoever it may be. So I think actually the training of humans in how to use AI to improve their daily workflows will be very, very important. And so actually leaving people behind on this journey is not going to be beneficial for an organization. It's something that needs to be very, very carefully considered when setting up everything else we've already discussed.
And I think it's an interesting point that Max mentions about the human in the loop, because if you sit down before and set the structure up, it's very easy to say, I am the human in the loop. This is my role, my responsibility. I think some of the hesitation that you see is when you create products that are people use as AI tooling to support their day to day. It's you're basically outsourcing responsibility, and you can't do that. So the way we always phrase it is you would never sit in the passenger seat of a autonomously driven car. You're supposed to be in the driver's seat with your hands near the steering wheel. So yes, it's driving for you, but you're sort of there correcting. And if you get pulled over by the police, you're the one responsible for the car. You can't say, oh, sorry, I ran that red light. It was the AI that did it, right? Regulators won't listen to that. Your customers you'll have sort of negative impacts if you say, oh, sorry for sending all your money to someone else. The AI model did that, wasn't my fault, right? You can't hide behind that. So we see that in people doing their job. They don't want to submit, even just using large language models for generating text, right? Generative AI is probably the easiest example. People don't want to use the AI to submit it because they don't want it saying something wrong and you have to check. But as Max is saying with the training, if you teach people how to use it, you massively expedite the process of writing it, and you become the reviewer, right? And then that process, and when I was talking about AI replacing you, it doesn't replace you as in, can you do this report and do it? You just get 10 more reports out the door rather than taking 10 times as long on one report. And I think that's the switch. Once people realize the reluctancy sort of disappears a lot quicker. But it is hard to do, as you mentioned.
Yeah. I think, there is very much a hype cycle with AI, as there is with many different technologies, where the initial excitement is very, very high, and then it falls off a cliff almost in terms of the excitement of what this is going to bring to my life. And then very gradually that, returns over time as the understanding, improves. So I think everyone saw when ChatGPT was first, I think GPT-3 was probably the first model that people were widely interacting with. Everyone was very excited, everyone was using it, everyone was talking about it. GPT-4 came out, less so, people weren't necessarily quite as interested, but gradually people have been getting back into that swing and understanding the benefits and how they use it. And obviously that comes with self-driven training, but also the training that people are being delivered within their organizations as well.
I think there's a lot of hype hopping as well. I don't know if that's a phrase, but it makes sense.
now.
Coined the phrase.
It is now. And basically moving from technology to technology, right? So if you think about the providers, ChatGPT comes out with one model, Claude comes out with another model, Anthropic has a ton of cool things that they're doing for institutional AI, and everybody's bouncing around. I think we've often talked, and I've listened to forums and people talk about the future of AI with, who is the one that's going to break through, and it's very, very tricky to put all your money on one horse. So I think people quite often see who's put their head above the parapet and is pushing the technology, and you might see a mass migration to one provider.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
from a risk perspective, a
yeah.
single horse is a very poor choice.
Well, yeah, exactly. But you do see the leaning towards one, right?
Yeah.
I know you're mentioning
the operational resilience. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you do need to be. I mean, that's a good point as well to come up. The concentration risk between AI providers as well, right? So, you have to be careful of the hype that you have for a new technology to then move everything over, because if you're constantly moving as well, that costs a lot of money, takes a lot of time. But if one provider in the future does do everything, you do end up with vendor lock-in. I'm sure Max has got just as much as I have to say about build versus buy. The build, it's your own IP, you can do it.
Yep.
The buy is, it's always a tricky conversation, because it's not particularly easy to choose who to buy from at the moment, because you have a lot of off-the-shelf technology that doesn't fit perfectly. So do you build and start from scratch to make sure you fit the mold, or is it easier to start with something off the shelf and make it fit with a little bit of tweaking and stuff, right? And then on the provider points, who is going to be your provider? And every provider we've talked to on behalf of the client wants you to sign a 10-year contract, wants you to be in the systems, and they obviously want to grow that relationship. So they have the pressure of continuing to keep your business by getting better and staying ahead. But we're talking about unicorns shooting through, right? You can't ignore the benefit of another provider doing it much better, because you are locked in with one, and you would become uncompetitive at a large scale if you don't have the ability to move quickly. So Max and I have worked together on vendor lock-in situations and how you manage that so that you are dynamic in the future, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the other thing to mention is, obviously we've talked a lot about AI technologies, but actually software as a service, I think the dictum is basically that software as a service is now a dead industry, and that because of Claude Code and all the other various sort of coding platforms that are AI driven, you can build your own software for next to nothing. The vibe coding and things like that, which is, again, a completely separate topic. But I think, as Fraser says, there is a single provider which may be able to do everything, but from a resilience perspective and from a sort of a hedging of your bets, I think obviously a multi-vendor strategy is probably what we'd end up recommending, just to sort of spread that risk.
Are you seeing that sort of range of the mix, multi-vendor selection, build versus buy? Do you see a preference for one over the other?
I think, personally with my clients, I've seen several conversations where, there have been these build versus buy conversations. I think it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. So we've sort of alluded to, there are very general tools and there are very specific tools. And some of the very, very specific tools are completely impractical to build yourself, because the knowledge base effectively of how to build a tool such as that is housed entirely within that single organization. We've seen obviously a lot of AI competition in terms of bringing development resource in-house, and each sort of the main houses are trying to get as much of the software development capability as possible. And so I think there are going to be specific cases where you will just have to buy, and you will be locked into providers. But I think it's a very interesting conversation to be had. If your developers are good enough in-house and if they have the right tooling, who's to say there's nothing that they can't build?
Yeah, I think the interesting point as well is the size of your organization, right? So we're talking generically about all businesses here, but if you are a large bank with hundreds of thousands of employees and you probably have the budget and it makes economic sense for you to capitalize on having a focused AI department. If you're small, smaller, not even small, still like sort of in the medium $1 million size. If the nature of your business is largely focused on non-tech issues, and the top of my mind is like a charity, for example, right? Like a charity is largely focused on the benefits they provide to the focus of that charity from donations that they get, and the nature of those people in that business, it would be a sort of a clash of culture to bring an AI department in and try and have them work together. And equally, you may not have the natural foundations and the skill set of the people in that business to then turn them into AI assets. Now, that's not to say charities can't build their own AI, but when you have banks, mortgage providers, lenders, asset managers, these types of people, they already work with massive amounts of data. They will have data science departments. They will have data lakes. They will have their own warehouses. They will have IT that sit behind it. You've already got the foundation of a department there. So it's a small switch, but it doesn't make sense all the time. So in the times where it doesn't make sense, then the buy aspect becomes much more appealing. So you do have to look at it use case by use case for the outcome that you want. But I think business by business we'll need to see. And in the future, there probably isn't a future without everybody using AI. And I think it's just how you tap into this new technology. You need to think about that yourself rather than try and copy what someone else has done, because it may not work perfectly for you. It isn't a cut and paste, one size fits all industry that we work in.
Where do you guys see AI going in a year, let's say, or 5 years?
I think AI has been on a journey already. So we've seen right from the sort of the early outset of the rules-based automations moving into machine learning, moving into sort of generative AI tools, and now starting to move into sort of agentic workflows as well. So the characterization of that would be sort of generative tools being very much something that you would use as a human being, whereas the sort of the agentic workflows is where AI will start to take parts of the process, do them, and then pass them to a human in the loop. So effectively becoming a co-worker of yours. That will definitely be something that will be pushed through in the next sort of year or so. I think within the next 5 years, it's going to be a very, very different outlook in terms of how things are sort of put together. There are regulatory considerations that we need to have, and there are also sort of considerations from a actual data center perspective as well. So I think that is a very broad question and probably something we don't have time to fully cover today.
Yeah, I think from a environment like landscape and an industry point of view, I think Max ended on a good point there about the policies and the frameworks need to keep up. So I think in the short term, everybody is talking about it, and everybody's talking about it with meaning. How do we use it? How do we start to use it? And how do we structure ourselves? Because everybody thinks that it's going to be part of their future. So I think that's going to be a year, maybe 2 years of people starting it up. I think in the future, you will have possibly industry standard regulation on how you would adopt it, which means if you're new to the industry or new to your engagement with AI, in your industry, the sort of roadmap and framework might be there already. From an organization structural point of view, I think AI departments in large institutions is almost a given. And that comes with new roles and jobs and responsibilities. So we've seen in the UK the creation of chief AI officer, right? That term did not exist a couple of years ago. And I don't see in the long term companies that don't have a partner of AI, a director of AI, a chief AI officer, those types of roles will come around. And with that shift, you will naturally see other roles, associate director to AI or something like that might come up as well. So you will start to see it everywhere, and more formalized is probably my short answer. It'll become more and more formal, more and more a part of everyday business operations.
I think it's that level of being embedded. So,
Yes,
we've
yeah.
obviously seen it within Copilot, for example, now coming up through your emails and, suggesting different ways to format your slides and all these different things. I think that's relatively surface level in terms of how it's implemented within our daily lives. I think it will start to become more deeply embedded. So think about sort of like suggestions and taking the next steps and working out where you're going to be going within your processes, or just, as some of the use cases that we've alluded to in terms of identification potentially of things that are not possible just by human means. So I think, it's going to be very interesting to see how it develops, but, I think keep your eyes peeled for how it becomes embedded within your everyday life.
Yeah, I think the embedments is a really good point. So if you think about any sort of new technology, you can almost sort of look to the past to predict the future. So I studied engineering at university, and my day one design course, I was on computer-aided design, so CAD as a software to help me build whatever we were building, right, at the time. Before, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, engineers used to sit with massive pieces of paper with, pencils and rulers and drawing out architectural structures and things like that. So very quickly, we moved to a point where anybody who's new to engineering doesn't even know what a world like was before computer-aided design. Now, AI is here. And so any 18-year-old, 19-year-old who's starting their professional career tomorrow is joining a world where AI exists. So it's already embedded for them. I think a lot of what we talked about is the transformation of people using AI at the moment who already exist in the business units, and it's new to them. But in the future, it'll be, you'll have HR training that covers AI policy and how to engage with AI tools properly. The same way we have fire safety drills, how to use a password on certain files and documents. That embedment of AI as a part of your business as we go forward will be there, not just from embedded in the technology point of view, but embedded in a part of the way that you structure and do the things that you're doing, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Max. Thank you, Fraser, both for your time today. That's been really insightful. There's clearly so much to talk about and unwrap here, so definitely more to come for sure, and we'll talk about that in future episodes, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone at home, for listening. This has been the Behive Podcast, brought to you by Be Shaping the Future UK. We're a management consultancy firm in London.